comparison.
Right. No, being so thank you so much.
Yeah.
And you know, this is Ben's first NAMM show. That's not there's something I would write about that, but yeah. Thank you so much for being here, and you know, this wonderful group of college students and faculty that is really your audience now, right?
Yeah, at the moment.
So take us back. This is kind of inside the musician studio. We'll start out sort of like that, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So, you know, start thinking what questions you might like to ask Ben Folds. Take us back to the beginning. Who was the first music teacher? How did it all, the training start?
I had sort of, at the time, when I was really little, I guess my first exposure to music was my father's construction worker and remodeled houses, and he used to work in a pretty down outside of town and would bring records back home. People would move suddenly and just leave all their stuff, and then he would just come back and plop down on the floor a load of, mostly it was R&B records from the 60s at the time. And now I still have those, and they're worth a lot.
Were they LPs, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I just listened. From the time I was 2 years old up until when I started playing piano when I was about 8, my biggest teacher was listening. And in fact, I spent so much time sitting on the floor listening to music that my grandmother suggested I be taken to a child psychologist.
Oh well, that's not the first time a musician's been told that.
Yeah. That child psychologist confirmed that I was slow. I'm glad someone laughs at that too. Yeah. But no, I think listening was the first, and I don't take any of the opportunities I had when I was a kid for granted at all, as I can see the way that people develop as musicians and having the time and the opportunity and the vast library of records. Let's do literally 8 hours a day. That's why they took me in. I mean, the kids don't sit in front of a record player for 8 hours, and then when you take them away, they start screaming and kicking and throwing fits. But that's an amazing thing. I also came up in a public school system that had good music programs.
Where was that?
That was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Winston-Salem.
Yeah.
North Carolina?
The South. America. Yeah, and so I had great music teachers. We sat on the floor when I was, I guess 3rd, 4th grade, and the music teacher, music class would just consist of singing a few songs, and then on the board, it would put rhythm notes like ta ti ti ta ta ti ti ta, that stuff. Yeah, and I just thought that was amazing. Like, I really loved that. It's like, wow, I can read music, and that's what we did. And I mean, I could really go on for a long time. But I had great music teachers. I never had a bad music teacher. I was very, very lucky.
So let's go back. So you were an accidental record collector at the beginning because your dad was cleaning out houses.
Yeah.
My thought is, what if he brought home a collection of like Tchaikovsky or
Yeah, but it wasn't. Yeah.
It was R&B. So that was like an accidental moment. And then you walked into great music programs in schools.
Well, I broke the records that were white people records anyway. So I did.
No dead white guy.
No. I mean, because like the Elvis Presley records, I even didn't like those. I liked R&B. When I was a kid, that's what spoke to me was that. And doesn't explain how I ended up making the music I make now, but
it was all laying the ground.
Yeah, rhythm. Yeah.
So what about formal training? I mean, did you go to a private piano teacher at some point?
There was, kind of. I mean, there was a little girl across the street. She was 15 or 16, and I was maybe 7 or 8, and I took lessons for a year and learned to read some. Played a couple pieces. I played the little kids' version of Turkish March. And my crowning achievement for the year was playing Maple Leaf Rag.
Oh, that's complicated.
But I was playing all the time. I mean, I got good really quickly because I was very intense about it, because I wasn't particularly doing amazingly in school, and I was getting in trouble a lot. And I got the basketball cramp back in my face every time I tried that. And music was something that I just found I was really good at it immediately, and it provided a lot of confidence. So I really worked at it really hard.
Yeah, and that's what we want for all of our kids, right?
Yeah,
all
yeah.
kids to have that experience.
They should all get the ball cramp in your face.
Right.
I'm sure you all have.
Too, right? But the whole idea that you walk, your parents, modest means parents, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my parents, I always say I came from, dirt poor farming community. They had a phenomenal music program in school.
Yeah.
And that, we all are working for that. So
Well, it doesn't take much. That's the thing. It's like we want as much as we can get, but it's different from place to place. And like I say, sitting on the floor. Didn't have chairs. We sat on the floor, and there was a woman who didn't have a piano, and she's writing ta-ti-ti-ta-ta on the board. And that made a huge difference to me, just right there.
It all lays the groundwork for the intellectual development, and you hang all the other thoughts on those trees.
Yeah, you could see it, you could hear it, everyone did it together, it sounded cool.
So what did you sat on the floor, what did the record player look like?
My record player, well, I went through 2 record players. The one that I remember, the tone arm was a dog bone.
Like a hand of it, like a dog bone?
Yeah, it was like a bone, like a dog bone. I had like some kind of Fido dude on it.
I remember my first record player. I had a little square, red box.
Yeah, those are
the red box, and you unclick the lid like a little suitcase.
Yeah.
Anybody remember their very first thing that they heard music on? A little record player? Let's not forget that. We live they're all in our pockets now. But there was that moment when this was a very physical, which I like the most recent YouTube with one of your guys in the background that kept throwing the LP onto the wall with your kids.
Oh, yeah.
It's very funny. When did you do that? Just recently?
That was a few years ago. That was we needed to come up with a EPK to pimp the new record. So my friend.
It's very funny.
My friend Ryan came over. He was our
History of Music? Is that the book?
Yeah, I think I just gave him a history of my music, and he was supposed to be mixing it up on a turntable. We got all these old records, and then I was going so quickly that he couldn't keep up with the history, so he put it on and then throw it behind.
It's very funny. It's history of music. It goes back to chant medieval music. It's very, and the kids are in, and they keep looking at you like, what?
Yeah, I made my kids sit through that.
Right, it's really great. So was there a standout mentor or coach along the way?
Well, I had a few. Some of them were imaginary. Like some of them now I've met.
Right, so we sat on the floor and had imaginary friends.
Imaginary mentors. Well, I do think I can't stress enough how important listening was to me, because I would imagine their perspective. The perspective of the people's music that I listened to was the most important thing to me. It was the one thing that made sense when other stuff didn't make sense, and that has informed my songwriting. Is perspective. It's like, who are you and what do you stand for? What do you got to say? Is a huge thing. Then real mentors, people that actually were real people. My first music teacher, the ta-ta-ta-ta-ti-ti-ta woman, was awesome. That was Miss Rushing.
Is she still around? You ever
visit
her?
I haven't visited her, but her son, or maybe grandson by now, I don't know who it was, has come out to a couple shows, and I've talked to him.
We want to meet her sometime.
Yeah, she was very cool.
Let's make sure she comes to the NAMM shows.
Well, the guy who really who was really big for me, his name was Chick Shelton, and he was a big band trumpet player, and he was my teacher in 7th and 8th grade. He's still in public school, and he was huge. As a person, he was actually huge, but he was a huge presence, and he had this awesome sense of humor. And a sense of humor, he was so informal. And while I was learning music, that taught me the idea of informality and human beings making music, which I try to carry with me when I played with symphony orchestras even, is that the human beings making music in a room together is you can imagine it when you're a kid, when they're imaginary mentors, they're a big hairy deal. They're on TV, they're making music, it's coming out of a record, and it's untouchable. He instilled in me the human being part, which I think about one time where I got everything backwards when I was a kid. I was a percussionist, and he was teaching me how to play swing on the hi-hat, and it should go, I had it, sure know why I heard it that way. And he's like, "Man, Folds, you dumbhead, what are you doing back there?" I don't know, just something about it just woke me up. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll get it right. It wouldn't have worked for him to say, "Oh, Mr. Folds over there, your splang seems to be backwards. Emphasis on the wrong syllable."
So it was really that music was a place for human connection too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
it
first and
dug
foremost.
deep into your heart. You felt it.
Yeah, it has to be, I have to personally be making music in an atmosphere which seems to be occupied by human beings.
And you know that, yeah, I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's also, I think, sort of the new period that we're in, even with classical music.
Well, look, you can strap even with rock music. Like, I don't like, I personally don't, it's not my cup of tea. I try to teach my kids not to say, "I hate this." It's not my cup of tea. Bands are strapped into like the fucking Starship Enterprise. You know, like they got all this stuff around and it's all formal. They've got stuff like this on them. It's just, it feels impersonal to me. Like, tear that stuff down as much as possible for me. Is more. Well, I don't mind amplifiers
Right. But
and stuff.
Unplugged in the head.
Yeah, just a sense that you're just. What does it take to you know, like to feel like you're in the same room?
You know, I came up through a classical training. You talk about growing up in a box, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
it's an important box. Yeah.
right, and also music. I was a music teacher, and I also did a lot of guitar. You know, the folk era was in my blood. And what I see happening, which is interesting to know because now you're working with symphony orchestras, I see that they're trying to, you know, take down the fourth wall of the stage and really open up that experience to audiences. What's your feeling about that in terms of that?
Well, I think
the formal side of music. You talk about the rock stuff.
I think it's like anything. There's a time for being formal and informal, and I think you know, I've probably erred on the side of being informal. I do respect the boundaries of a symphony orchestra simply because structurally it can't be anarchy and mayhem where it doesn't work. It's a very structured, formal place. I would be very careful about anything that I would feel dumbs down the institution in any way. We don't need like wet t-shirt contest happening on stage.
We don't? No, well, not
We can
yet.
start now. It's just, you know, so it is a balance. As much as I speak about the human beings, I still really think my reaction to that is sort of cautious. I think the institution of the symphony orchestra has come about because it was also practical as well as musical, and you know, yeah, you don't want to go in there and have your cell phone on, and you don't want to be talking to the band like, "I like that note, that was good." There needs to be, for you know, like, where does it stop is another thing. I think when I don't have time for snobs. I think that if it's hit the point where people feel intimidated, that's a problem. So what we need to do, like you say, is break down the fourth wall for a bit to bring people into the experience that they understand it. Then that's good. But do I feel good about like people kind of stand there, you know, seeing a Mahler concert going with their phone? That's probably not on.
Well, you know, I think it's also that it's the rigor of our tradition. You know, it's like there's nothing more remarkable when a bunch of I would say sort of uninitiated younger people hear an absolutely fantastic performance of music, and they just know that it's fantastic. You know, so it's like in the presentation of the music, whatever it is, the quality just is really what we're committed to, right? I mean, a quality experience that dives deep, and then you can into the heart and the mind of what music can do, and then also, you know, you have the opportunity maybe to meet that person later, or you have that interaction, like we're doing with you here. You know, kind of demystifying all the things that you are working on. So after meeting you in the fall, and we met at a very lovely place.
Yeah.
We met at the Sundance Resort, and we had dinner at Robert Redford's house. Pretty shabby. So what we get to do, you know, is like pinch me, right?
Yeah, no, that's cool.
It was really
hanging out with Bob in his backyard.
Bob, yeah, really something. But I did then, you know, I knew your music before. before, but I took a deeper dive. You know, I just said, wow, there's something really rich that I want to know. And I think I maybe scratched a little bit, you know, Ben Folds, the poet. You know, the whole, so tell us about that part of the creative process. And you know, you had this wonderful ability to take a word and, you know, how the word can loop around and have different meaning, and then it's just really beautiful. Does that just, did you like have pages and pages and scraps, and are you working at it a lot?
Well, for me, the music comes first, and I really strongly feel that there are already lyrics in the music. It's not that different than the rock or the piece of wood with the sculptures. And I mean, the words are definitely in the songs anyway. It's pushed me as a wordsmith to have to find that. I think it's really difficult. But I wouldn't know where to start if I just sat down and like write poetry. But because it's in the music, I spend a long time, and just because like you have a happy chord doesn't mean that that's a happy word on it. I think things in terms of tension and release, it just sort of, that's what makes something sad. It's like, you know, you can have a last verse, for instance, where the guy just doesn't have it in him to go on to the rest of the verse. And so he says, and I'm going to go back to, forget it, drops the mic, walks off. There's something sad about someone not being able to continue. So if you cut a verse in half, then suddenly I feel there's something sad there. Maybe it's on a major chord, but to me I'm hearing things in the cadence that are sad and happy, and that's what I work really hard to do. And yeah, I mean, I work on lyrics. One of my last things that I do is a few notebooks of paper where I'm ripping the page out, writing the song from beginning to end, and then writing it over again. For some reason I do this on the floor. I'm back to the floor. Maybe it's because of being a kid. I'll be on the floor in the studio doing this, or wherever I am writing, and then I'll copy it over again. But the second time I'll notice that I copied it differently. Like it gets copied differently because somewhere along the way there's something that I wanted to say, and I feel like I'm using sort of the vocabulary of a pop writer, and I don't like that. Like that's not, you know, you and me, girl, we're going to the, you know, so that's not the way we talk. And for some reason, as songwriters, we have like a really limited vocabulary. I like to, you know, write something out of a physics book or something where it's not the language that you use, you know. And I think that's been a big thing for my lyrics, is writing words that didn't naturally. Same with music. I never want to write music that falls under my hands.
Wow, Ben the poet. Like I said, you know, you just said the lyrics are in the song.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. And maybe there are, you know, maybe there's 4 sets of lyrics I can think of in the song, and they're all completely different things, but they have a cadence. You know, when I'm walking around and I have a melody in my head, that melody usually came from when I wake up in the morning. There's one in my head. And it could be basically, you know, sort of morphed and synthesized from a Burger King commercial theme I heard the night before. I don't know where it came from, theme and variation on Burger King. And when I wake up, I have that, and then as I'm walking around and it's developing during the day, I'm finding it's moving me. I mean, sometimes I'm vain enough to hear the applause after the bridge, or I get a chill like at the first chorus or something. My job is then to get that to the finish line somehow, find out what it's about, without screwing it up too badly.
You know, it's not always easy to talk about your own process, but it's really helpful. It's helpful to me to hear this process because, you know, in every part of our lives we have some of this process. Yeah. But a singer-songwriter, you know, that actually can take it then out and record it and develop it and create the layers and layers and layers of work to get it out there is, you know, it's just inspiring to hear.
Well, it's really frustrating.
Where it comes from. Well, yeah, it's human. It's very human.
But I mean, it's very frustrating to learn to do it and to find your voice. It's so frustrating. And anyone that doesn't go through that process of wanting to quit over and over again or pulling their hair out over it, especially for me, was late teenage years. I just thought I would never get to the point of finishing a song that I liked. And I was frustrated as well because in my era, back in my day, kids, they didn't, like, people didn't come on TV and you didn't even see what they looked like half the time. Kiss came on TV one time. It's like, Kiss is going to come on TV unmasked. I was like, damn, this is going to be amazing. I've waited for this all day long. And then they showed this interview and they turned their backs to the camera. They had a camera go around their back and they were at a table. And I was like, man, I hate these guys. But I think now it's kind of cool because you have, I mean, and I would read interviews with, the artist would say, you know, like, how did you get to where you were? And somehow the interview ended up being like, you know, I was learning in my basement playing this rock band. Then when I was getting my first Grammy and I was talking, it was like, well, how did you get there? Like, how did you actually get there? Because I think a lot of people that come to something like this, that may be on your mind. It's like, how am I going to get to the next step? And I think no one can tell you that, but it does happen. And it's very messy.
And it's hard, introspective work, right?
It is.
It takes a lot of growth and a lot of internal understanding.
And everyone's thing is so different.
Yeah.
You know, it's never any one thing. It's never any one person, one event, one award, interview, chart position, anything that is it. Those things are never what everyone's, even now in my career, people say, boy, that thing you just did for so-and-so must be huge. No. That didn't sell records? Hell no. What sold records was sticking by my guns and playing it out and doing it. You know?
So then the most, the kind of the tag of that is that personal conviction and self-development and self-understanding is what's driving it all.
Yeah, I think it's just doing it. I think it's doing it through, you know, a music career of any kind is, you know, daily disappointment, frustration, humiliation.
Okay, welcome to the NAMM show.
And if you can't embrace that a little bit and look forward to the wonderful moments that it brings that are surprising and happen all the time, that's really hard. I mean, I'd be waiting tables. I was waiting tables till I was 27, so it's not something I got. It happened for me very quickly. I was very stubborn too. But like, I remember waiting tables, and I wouldn't tell people that I waited tables with that I had a band. That's not something I wanted to tell them because I didn't feel like other people really wanted to see me succeed at something because we're all waiting tables together, and it's like, I didn't want to be ridiculed or have it looked at as something small. So I didn't say anything. I didn't want them like out on the front row and there's only like six people in the whole place. But I go out, blow up a PA system, let's say in some other town, playing for a handful of people, have to pay for the PA system, get back just in time to go to work the next morning, just completely demoralized. And that was pretty common.
Oh yeah, I mean, as a classical flutist, I traveled with a harpsichordist, and we would go out and do gigs, pay for the gas to get there, and then do all of our own marketing, and pay it, buy the wine for the reception, and come home. So it's the same difference, you know.
How do you feel about people who say flautist?
Oh, it costs you more.
Yeah.
Flautist.
That's more expensive.
Right, flautist is a lot more expensive. Well, anyway, we want to open it up and have some questions from the audience. You know, we might have to encourage Ben to maybe play something. He won't sing.
Talk for a little.
Let's do some questions. Who do we have? We have some questions from the audience. We'll have some.
You pick them. Otherwise, I'll just.
Yeah, you pick them.
No, you pick them.
Oh, okay. Right in here, we have first question here. Go ahead.
Hi, Ben. I love you.
I love you.
I've been listening to your music since I was about 11 years old. My sister was a clarinet player, and I heard Stevens last night in town over and over and over. I could ask you a lot of questions right now, but I'll limit it to what I think would be best for the room, for the situation. How do you feel about Pandora, Spotify, YouTube, and intellectual property in terms of the musicians and artists getting paid for their work?
Yeah.
Big topic.
Well, it is a big topic. It's really complicated. It's complicated for me. Here's what I heard out of that and what I respond to. First of all, he said Pandora, and I like those guys. Now, I don't know if they're ripping me off or not, but I like them. I went up to their office and I played, and I thought the guy was absolutely brilliant. I thought his heart was in the right place. He'd done an amazing thing where their algorithm sort of didn't favor necessarily something that was more popular. It favored something you might like.
Yeah.
So that's a format that gives people whose record might not otherwise be heard. If you like this, you might like this, but it's a lot more. They have like something like 40 musicologists or something in there in rooms, taking down every single detail and parameter of a song's, like what it sounds like, even like down to the tone of the lyrics, the tone of the timbre of the voice, the key of the song, the tense of the lyrics, and all this stuff goes into this thing. And if you like something, then you might like something else. The one thing that's not in there is how popular or how many records it sold. And there was never anything like that when I was growing up. So the first thing I hear is that. Spotify, someone put it on my computer, and I had to eventually take it off because it kept on. Every time I turned my computer on, that shit came up first, and I had to like close it all out before I could write my email. That's what I thought about when I heard Spotify. But, it may be great. Now, as far as intellectual property, I mean, my position on it when it all went down, when Napster was going on, was that I wrote letters on behalf of Napster because I thought they were being shut down unfairly, and I also was really skeptical. I have to say, I don't think there were many of my peers that felt this way. I was really skeptical of picking a fight with someone who had interesting new technology, who was making music exciting, and in an era that I felt like, really rock and roll was kind of hurting. There's a lot of rock and roll and danger in stealing music, so at least there's some rock and roll left in the music business that people were pirating it. That occurred to me. The other thing that occurred to me is that it ruined the music business. It put a lot of my friends out of work. I signed on my first solo album. I probably signed more burned CDs in the year 2001 than I was signing real ones, and I think that's because, one, audiences felt comfortable that I was okay with them having the music, which I was, and I just didn't feel like we should pick a fight. So I think it's really complicated because, on one hand, the music industry is ahead of the rest of the economy in being in a Great Depression, and it has been for a while. On the other hand, certain things have been made much more exciting, and music has found a different way. A different kind of music is valued, and a different way of getting to people, whether it's YouTube or it's just something else that's come out yesterday that I'm not aware of. Maybe YouTube doesn't exist anymore, but there's always something new, and I think that that's really interesting. So I have a hard time taking a really solid stand on it. I think, like, one thing that I find offensive is to see that if my music is on a site where they're selling a lot of ads on the site, and the people have been drawn to the site by my music. Now, while I don't really put my priority in sending some dog out to break their thumbs and to give me my money, I'm not interested in that. I am interested in knowing what my name is next to selling. Like, is it Sugar Water or some stupid car or someone's bad music? I don't really want to have my name next to that stuff, and I think that they need to sort that out, which I think is in the works. But it's tough because you write something and that is your intellectual property. At the same time, as an artist, there's a sense that it is everybody's too. And we're going through some intense growing pains about that. I think the unfortunate side of it is the economic side. But look, as a music industry, I came up in a time that I think was very corrupt, and we asked far too much money for the music that we were giving people. And I thought that at the time. I thought, this doesn't cost this much to make a piece of plastic. This is really not right. And there's some karma that's coming back to us that way. But I think it'll all level out. In the end, real music survives. In the end, real music, and that's really important that when people get into conversations about the digital revolution, that we keep it balanced, 90% in how we make great music with all this new technology, and 10% on how we're going to sell it. You know, I think it's really...
Make the music happen. Right here? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Good morning. Did you have a first big break that pushed you forward in the industry?
No.
And what was it? And how did you know?
Are you still waiting for your first big break?
But if you had more of the question, I didn't mean to. No.
What was it? And how did you feel and react to a new level of recognition?
Well, those... I actually wrote a song where I included a lyric that said, there's never going to be a moment of truth, because I realized that there wasn't. In my life and in my career, I personally haven't had that moment. I know a lot of people, they make movies about it. I mean, think about like a love story in a movie where it's the cheesiest shit you've ever seen, where at the very end of the movie, the guy decides somehow in public to grab a microphone, and on the other side is his girlfriend's in the crowd, and they come through the crowd, and then they embrace and kiss, and he's like dedicated his life to her over there, and everyone's like, yeah! Like that kind of doesn't happen in most relationships. And that is the way a music career is. Like that's the way people want to think about it. But like I was saying, it's not about those one times. You know, like Rolling Stone reviewed our first record, and everyone was like, wow, that's it, I'll bet. And I thought maybe this, it didn't make any difference. It didn't sell more records. The only show that I ever played that sold more records was Saturday Night Live. It was the worst I ever played in my life. And it doesn't line up that way. I think it's real important. I mean, your big moments are going to be something that no one else knows about. It's going to be something on stage like where you have, if you're a musician, where suddenly you have a realization that I don't need high end in my monitor. Oh, that's amazing. Like to me, that was my big break the day that I told that guy to start taking everything 6K and up out of my monitor. And I was a much happier person. 6K is
When you just know that you're on stage and it feels just right.
yeah.
Right? There's just something that happens, right?
Yeah, I think those musical times are really big. And a relationship you might have one night with an audience where you just know we're all on the same page. It might be that something happened. I mean, events happen out in the world, and you as a musician or a person working on the crew or a manager or anything, you got to get on with life. If it's a 9/11 day and you have a performance, then your job is to go out there and fight it back and go within yourself and provide an hour and a half or whatever it is of your honest professional, that you do. And those times can be really, really, really big too. But never was a moment like, the president gave me an award for everyone, and then everything was fine.
So the journey is the internal. External is fun, but
Yeah.
the internal.
I think so.
benchmarks.
Yeah, and they're not what you think they are.
Yeah. Well, maybe they are what we think they are. But it's like, the entertainment field and the marketing messaging and all the, we have to be careful that we don't stand under that cloud and remember that music does come from this lifelong journey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I played a thing a couple nights ago, and I realized when I was on stage singing Happy Birthday with Ringo Starr to David Lynch, and it was Eric Burden next to me, and Jim Carrey, where I go, Happy Birthday. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. Singing Happy Birthday ended up being one of the big moments of my musical career. And I didn't get sued for it.
Well, you said that you tell me about this remarkable studio in Nashville, RCA Studio A. Did I say that?
Yeah, that's right. It
And
was.
that Elvis recorded there. I assume that you didn't break that record, right? The record that you did there, you said
I might have.
you might have.
It's possible. I mean, so much stuff was recorded in the studio that I've taken over for the last 10 years. But, you know, the way the studio happened, I mean, there's two interesting things about it. Maybe this is enlightening in some kind of way, the way the music business works, and we're talking about these moments that are like, here's the truth moment, or a big, like, you know, the sky opens kind of thing. When I was in Nashville on my first stint, when I was 20 years old, I was brought there by a music publisher. I played, this is not the way it's supposed to go, but I played one gig on the piano. I was a bassist at that time. I was playing bass in a funk band, slapping my bass. And I was playing for this guy who sounded like Prince. And he had all this record interest in North Carolina. They were all flying in to Raleigh to see Mark play a show, and I was playing bass. My funk band, which was like a funky white boy band, was supposed to be opening up for me, and we broke up before the gig, and it was important for me to do the gig. So I'd been writing songs on the piano for that band that weren't funky songs at all, and those songs ended up being they were the songs that were on my first album. So I played this little gig. The guy who sounded like Prince, who was really talented and is still a friend of mine, he's a chemist. He didn't happen for him, but they all wanted to talk to me, and I couldn't believe it. It was like, oh, great, well, all right, that sounds good. So I ended up signing a deal to go out to Nashville as a music publisher. One of the guys, it was one of the two guys in my music publishers, had been the president of ABC Records in the 70s. He signed Steely Dan, for instance. And he had a lot of good advice for me. He had a friend who had a studio, which was the Studio RCA, Studio A. I was allowed to go into that studio from like midnight to 8 in the morning to record my stuff. I remember Take 6 was in there at the time, in the daytime, and they were recording.
They were here last year on this.
They're amazing.
Yeah,
Watch those guys record. It's outstanding. Humbling. Anyway, to make a long story very long, I was on the couch waiting to go in. Waiting to go in because you never know when I could go in. The studio owner is like Mr. So-and-so, and I was like, thank you, Mr. So-and-so, thank you very much, Mr. So-and-so, for your time. Yes, I'll put that back. No, that I didn't leave coffee on that, Mr. So-and-so. Well, years later, Mr. So-and-so came up on very, very hard times, and was abusing a lot of drugs and lost everything. The studio was in total disrepair. The doors were open, and there was breeze blowing through, and there were wires pulled up. And I came in and I asked if I could rent the place. This was 2002, and the woman said, "Get your not well-dressed ass out of here," which I did, and then she Googled me and called me back. And I took over the studio, and I've been there for that long. It's a beautiful studio. The cutting room is roughly the size, different dimensions, but of this room. You could play basketball in this room and put some bleachers up.
Really historic.
Amazing records have been recorded there. It's got a history on the walls, but most importantly, it's a very musical space. I've become really spoiled because you put a mic on something and you play it, it sounds good. Now, I came out to LA to do a soundtrack for a movie, and it was a great sound stage, and we put mics on stuff and it sounded like ass with a stick. So I had to work really hard to get good sound, so I'm very spoiled to this old school of sound, design of a room that sounds great, and starting from the beginning with acoustic instruments has been...
It was built in the 60s, right?
Yeah. Early 60s, Chet
and,
Atkins.
And the word is from the Nashville crowd that they're just so grateful that you preserved the space. You know, I mean, it's one of those spaces that people really revere.
It didn't, yeah. A lot of times it's not really in the business's best interest to make a space a tourist spot or to make it historical. And that was the case with this. And a lot of people lived in Nashville that didn't know about this place. And now more people know about it. I mean, we were on the way here and of course had to drop into a Starbucks and get some crack. So they were playing the Tony Bennett record with Tony Bennett and Willie Nelson were singing together. It's like, that was in my studio. That's awesome. You can make those kind of records in my studio because a big band and an orchestra can all play. You can play live and everyone sounds good together.
That's great. We have a couple more questions. Here's one here. Where's our mic? Isn't this great?
Sorry. I'm Nick from the AC of UCO. You actually came to our school and did a master class with Scott Booker not too long ago.
Oh, yeah.
I'm here with 8 students right now, but I'd like to ask you a little bit about your sort of multifaceted career right now and how important it is. I mean, did you feel pulled to do things like this, along with being on television, along with playing live shows and arranging and songwriting and everything, or was it sort of a natural progression?
A little bit of both. I think I've opened my mind to, I've relaxed to the time that we live in. Because I do have a romantic notion that I would like to be locked in a room. Like I just finished a piano concerto, and that took 6 months of hard work, a lot of discipline, very humbling, and you know, the orchestration of it I'm still dealing with. In fact, when I get out of here, I'm running off with the score and marking it up again. And I would like to be locked in a room doing that. And my romantic, historical side, you know, makes me feel like, you know, I'm sure Beethoven didn't have to go live tweak the sing-off. That's really harsh my mellow today. But I also feel like this, the times that we live in, is everything is stirring into one thing. And some people are really ahead of that curve. Like, you know, Leonard Bernstein's a good example of someone who's out there giving lectures and talking and answering questions and being a human being. And then he was conducting and composing and performing, doing all those things. For me, one, it almost drives me crazy. It's real hard to do. Like, I find it very difficult to go from